Hey, America. Um, no, no, I am definitely not over Ms. Good. I'm not. I'm not over how that went down. I'm not over what's going on in our nation. I am not over watching what's happening with regard to do we live in our own form of democracy, which has lasted for 250 years and is a pretty damn good system and has been the model for so many others in this world, and seeing that being torn to shreds and being turned into the shithole nation that this guy way back when started saying that's what these others are. Yeah, well, you've made this that. I'm going to make this really quick because I really only want to I want to deal on one aspect of all of this, and that is the law enforcement aspect of it. First thing is, you have to realize that ICE, Immigration Customs Enforcement, is, to a degree, a law enforcement agency, but their purview is limited. Their purview is limited to basically if there are people illegally here in our country, that definition is open still. But if there are people here illegally in our country, that's what they're here for. To apprehend those people and bring them into a system where where justice is served with due process. They're not here to kill American citizens. But I want to talk about law enforcement because I've spent a little bit of time in the last few days talking with friends and relatives, very close relatives, that are actually law enforcement. They are people that, they're called Leos. Well, my name too, but no. LEO, Law Enforcement Officer. And one of those is my brother-in-law. I say brother-in-law, and that's kind of loose because, frankly, the guy's my brother. He's married to my sister. That makes him that all by itself. But he's also a very similar mind as myself, and that makes him my brother. So my brother is a deputy sheriff. Not here. Not in a red state at all. He lives in southern Vermont. But we've talked, and I've talked with many others. I've talked with, I think, now 12, and asked them their feelings on this. And I want to point out a thing, what this is doing, and that is undermining good law enforcement people. My brother is one of those, as is my friend Sheriff Michael Brock, as I could go down the whole list. But they're the real thing. And to a person, those I've talked to have pointed out a thing that is apparently missed by many of those who are sitting here applauding a young woman being shot in the face by a law enforcement officer, all with the same stupid claim. Well, if she'd have just gotten out of the car as they ordered. There's some problems with that too, because that was not the only order she was being given. There are also, at the same time, other law enforcement people saying, move the car. And then a car stops, guy gets out, walks up and says, get out of the car. Well, she's already backing the car up at the time, and then he starts reaching into the car, and she has now put it in drive. But there are people around her, and very clearly, and it's ironic, because it's in the video that Trump and his regime say is the most damning. It's from the guy that murdered her. It's that simple. He murdered her. In his video, from his cell phone, now they didn't show the earlier stuff, the stuff where she was really trying to comply. They showed some of it. But he's standing there, and she's been ordered to move the vehicle and get out of the vehicle. She puts it in drive, and she turns the wheel completely away from this guy. It's very clear in his video. I'm going to a different place here. That's the reality of what happened there. And he pulled his weapon just about the time she was starting to put the vehicle into drive. And at just the moment when the vehicle starts moving forward, which was not in his direction, it was away from him, he pulls the trigger, shoots her through the windshield, and then as she's probably dead, foot hits the accelerator. Things like that happen when you've been shot and die. The accelerator gets hit. It goes past. Obviously, the wheel has been cut the other way. Misses him completely where he should never have been. And any real law enforcement officer will tell you that. He should not have been where he was. If he'd had any real law enforcement training, he would not have been there. But car veers away from him and slams into a telephone pole and another car because she's already dead. That's not really where I'm going with this, though, because those things are there. That's on the tapes, including that murderer's tape. Where I'm going with this, if Immigration Customs Enforcement were real police, a few things would have happened immediately. The very first thing is, the guy that pulled the trigger, this happened to be a male, so he would have had to surrender his weapon to a superior immediately after the shooting. That's how it works, people. That's law enforcement 101. You have to shoot somebody, pull out your badge, pull out your gun, set them down in front of your supervisor and say, this happened. There you go. At that point, my alarm just went off like it always does. At that point, hey, you guys, hey! Got to control them too. But at that point, after surrendering his weapon, he would have been put on administrative leave. That happens every single time there is a death involving the use of lethal force with a real law enforcement officer. He'd have been on administrative leave. Now, he'd have been paid until the investigation was done. The investigation. Which investigation? Oh, Department of Homeland Security has decided nope, and the Trump regime behind them has decided nope, we're going to do the investigation. We can't trust them. You lying bastards. You lying sons of bitches. But would have been placed on administrative leave while the investigation was going on. One thing that would not have happened in a real law enforcement situation, that law enforcement officer would not have been allowed to get up, walk to their vehicle, and, by the way, walking perfectly healthy for somebody that had been run over, walk to their vehicle, put the key in, start it up, and drive away. Nowhere in this nation would that have been how that played out with a real law enforcement officer. There are protests all over this country right now. There are protests for cause. This was a murder. This was just somebody that freaked the fuck out, that didn't have the training that they should have had, and probably was itching to shoot somebody anyway, because 6 months ago, they had done the same thing as the asshole that had walked up and reached in the car and ended up with that person dragging them down the street a few yards. So that person probably had PTSD, and they probably should have been on administrative leave before they were even in that situation. But no, we're talking about ICE here. We're talking about people that if we're lucky, they have 40 hours of training. We're talking about people that are, all too many of them, pardoned J6ers. Another thing I want to see a change in our nation's authority to the president. Pardons, I get it, just fine. But if that person has been pardoned by the president, any further crimes that person commits, they're on the person that pardoned them. Put some teeth into checking authority. People, the nation is mad right now. Thousands of people in the streets. That's not enough. We need hundreds of thousands. We need millions of people in the streets. This guy should have never been there in the first place. This guy probably should never have been allowed to be where they were just for the things that had happened in their recent history. And yet they were. And that's because they are not law enforcement officers. We have a bunch of thugs. This is Donald J. Trump's Gestapo. And they're trying to control you. They're trying to terrify you. They are a domestic terrorist organization. Treat them as such. I love you, America. Share this shit.